And the last gear is developing mastery. And you'll see the word mastery written 2 times on our chart. Once in the middle, because everything we're talking about today in terms of these 5 gears is leading towards students' mastery of the subject area. And you'll also see mastery as a 5th gear, where we can explicitly do things with our students to engage them so that they will reach mastery. Let's look at 3 different areas that are essential for establishing mastery. One is deep engagement, a second one is reflection, and the third one is self-direction. Let's look at them each separately. Mastery is deep engagement in terms of having students not do surface learning that might be just a quick and dirty memorization of facts at a rote level and spilling them back on a test, but doing what AAC and U refers to as high impact practices. 3 that all faculty can do in their classrooms to have students to do some kind of research, whether you call it undergraduate research or just a research project that you've established for them. Having students do extensive writing and having students collaborate. Or maybe doing all 3, having students collaborate and write about something that they're researching together. Student projects are another way of terming this. If you have students at the end of the course put together everything they've learned, integrate it, deal with the generalizations of your course in a student project, this is going to promote mastery of something versus just lightly learning. The second part for mastery is reflection. Reflection is that internal conversation that you have with yourself as you're learning something new or working on a project. A couple things we can do specifically for reflection. One we've already talked about, and those are exam wrappers, preferably for a midterm exam so that they can actually use it for the final exam, or any kind of assignment wrappers. And still, the same key things. You're asking students to analyze the feedback you've given them and the feedback they can glean from having a look at the results of their assignment or their exam. And in 3 categories, talk about the things that they're doing well, and then patterns for weaknesses that they need to work on, and really, so importantly, to analyze the strategies they use to study and how much preparation time they put in. For instance, if they're doing a project that's a performance-based assessment kind of test, just looking at flashcards isn't going to help them. They need to actually replicate some kind of performance task to study for that exam. In addition to having students do exam wrappers, another type of reflection, just simple reflection journals. And I know many faculty do that, and they may just use the same generic questions at the end of each assignment. They just may ask students to, what was the main point of the assignment or the reading? What was surprising to you about the reading and why was it surprising? And third question, what was confusing and why? You might ask students to post that online before class and then take a look at that. Or I tend to like to do it at the very beginning of class, where I give students a no carbon required paper that's just a half a sheet that I've had made. Class starts at 4 o'clock. They know that from 4 to 4:05 that we're going to do that reflection, and once I've collected it, it's not going to be made up again. In other words, you have to be there. And for my students, that gets them to class on time. And because it's no carbon required paper, I collect a sheet and they're holding onto a sheet. So we each have a copy, and then we form small groups to talk about the responses, and then we talk about the responses totally. And if in fact the questions were about the exam readings to prepare them for today's class, then we're perfectly launched into the topic for today's class. So I really love that kind of simple reflection journal. For mastery then, in addition to deep engagement in the subject, reflection, the third is self-direction. They have to feel like they own the project. They have to come up with the topic. This has to do with choice. And look back to your own schooling. We all went through years of schooling, and there's some things that we did that have stayed with you today. For me, it was my botany class. As a freshman, I took botany. I didn't know anything about plants, but I just knew that I didn't want to dissect an animal. I didn't much like blood, so I thought, okay, I can deal with botany. And the final project, after we spent a lot of time in the lab and analyzing spongy parenchyma cells, the final project was to do a wildflower collection project. And in the Santa Monica Mountains, we were to go hiking to collect, dry, taxonomize, and mount and put in a notebook our wildflowers. And I spent hours on that. To this day, I have 2 huge notebooks that are, 50 years later that are, crumbling, but it became my lifelong hobby. You should see my backyard. It's gorgeous. I am a master gardener at this point as a result of that course.
Developing mastery in a content area serves basically two purposes, specifically in science. Number one, what we find in research is that once a student becomes an expert, let's say, in one area, their ability to become an expert in another area is enhanced because of that. Because they've developed skills, they've developed a way of thinking that enhances their learning.
Well, those are the 5 gears for activating learning. And we invite you to very explicitly analyze your teaching using those 5 gears. Why? Makes learning better, faster, makes it more enjoyable for you. I don't know about you, but there's nothing I'd rather not do than read a whole set of exams where the students do poorly. So when we talk about the joy of teaching, using this 80 years of research on how people learn has the probability of not only students learning better and longer, but it also makes the joy of teaching a lot more likely for you and for me. And we would love to hear back from you, so if we in any way can be a part of this conversation with either your department or your college or whatever unit you happen to be in, contact us at our email address, and any one of us from the Teaching Learning Founding Group would be happy to communicate with you further and join your conversation.